Hello, this is Stacy Goff, and I'd like to welcome you to the December ASAPM Dialogue Series. In this event, 4 opportunities to improve project portfolio performance. You'll actually see an expansion of a segment that I did at the IPMA World Congress in Istanbul earlier in November. So let's go ahead and get on with it. I am Stacy Goff. I'm the president of ASAPM. I'm also the vice president-elect of IPMA. I'll be responsible for IPMA marketing, and in my spare time, I'm president of Project Experts. Tim Jakes is our moderator, and he's the ASAPM director of standards, and he's also the CEO of Line of Cite. The agenda. The objective overall is to help you improve project portfolio performance. If that's something important for you, you're in the right place. The introduction section, 1 page on today's challenges, and then 4 topics: turning PM training into learning, assuring stakeholder competence, focusing on the managers in the middle, assessing then improving organizational PM performance, and then a brief summary and questions and answers for those who are online. Today's challenges. Raise your hand if you think that this is a difficult economy. Well, I see lots of hands up. And do you have competing internal priorities, for instance, between ongoing operations and your projects and programs? Do you have resource demands and, in fact, not enough talent to fill them all? Do you have pressure to do more with less? And in fact, you should read my blog post if you do have pressure. What you need today is more internal attention and higher priority for all the projects and programs in your PM portfolio. You need greater internal visibility for your efforts. You need greater executive support. You need demonstrated, measurable PM results, and obviously, you need PM performance getting you business benefits. The first topic, turning training into learning. Here's an assertion. You've spent billions of dollars on project management training over the last 20 years. Why? One possible reason is to create common knowledge, because common knowledge base can help everybody to communicate more effectively. Another reason is for certification at some level, whether it's entry level or advanced. Another reason to increase PM competence. Even more important, to improve PM performance. Or it could be a combination of those reasons. The truths, training can build a knowledge foundation if it's the right kind of training. But I'm afraid we've seen a lot of training that didn't do anything more than help pass some exam someplace. And so we need the right training to build the right knowledge foundation. And while training is a good start, you don't build competence in the classroom. You don't build performance in the classroom. You build that in the workplace. And it takes more than just sending people away to class and then hoping that they're going to apply it back on the job. Interesting statistic that tells me I've been wrong for about 30 years. I've said for years that the half-life of classroom training not applied is 6 weeks. Well, recently I found out that the half-life of that training not applied is only 2 weeks. So we're in even worse shape than we thought. Training's all about knowledge, and the key question there is knowledge enough? In some cases, you may want more than just knowledge. For example, you board a flight piloted by 2 Air Academy graduates who have never taken off or landed a plane. How comfortable are you? Your defense lawyer just passed the bar, knows all the case law, but has never practiced before a jury. Your heart surgeon memorized the manual, but has never used a scalpel. You comfortable in any of these situations? How about this one? Your project manager of your most important strategic project has passed an exam, but has never managed a project end to end. So what's missing in these 4 examples? Well, it may be something more than just knowledge. It may be the progression, applying that knowledge to get performance. So let's take a look at what training's all about. Training is what you do to people, but learning is what people do. So you can do training in the classroom, but learning is what produces performance. ASAPM has a series of learning initiatives that are oriented towards helping people improve their project performance. One initiative is the NCB, or in the case of IPMA, the ICB, that's the National Competence Baseline, which identifies the 46 or 48 elements of performance and competence that people need to demonstrate on the job. Another initiative is to establish measurable learning objectives. We see so many course outlines that just have buzzwords and no takeaways. There's no statement that says what the participants will be able to do coming out of that workshop or applying that on the job. ASAPM has its Competence Enablers program with trainers who know how to develop the foundation for performance in the classroom. And of course, doing additional things to carry organizations through amplifying knowledge, helping turn it into performance. Back to that ICB, the IPMA competence baseline, one element of that is the common technical competences that are pretty commonly taught in most colleges, most courses, most curricula. But over on the right, we see the behavioral elements. So looking closely, leadership, self-control, openness, assertiveness, creativity, reliability, ethics, just for a large handful. How important are those in project benefits, project results? Not at all, or very important. And then over on the left-hand side, we have the contextual elements. Understanding how to manage a project, a program, a portfolio organization. Understanding how the business works. Understanding HR management. Understanding finance. Understanding the legal requirements and processes of the organization. Are those important to your projects? Well, in many organizations, we don't see the behavioral competences. And in fact, in many curricula, we don't see anything at all about the contextual elements. And in fact, even if we look at IPMA's technical competence elements, we see here a full cube of elements. But if we look at some other knowledge sources, in fact, the basis of a popular certification, we see that even though they do have technical elements, they're pretty sparse. There are a lot of voids. So do you see the difference between these two models? Given that we understand the importance of the right baseline for learning, then let's take a look at what it takes to turn learning into performance. The first step is knowledge, and classes can be great for exposing people to the right knowledge. The second step is application. Now you can get some application with some exercise in class. In some cases, simulations can help there. But the best application tends to be on the job after the class is over. The next step after that, on the job, when somebody does something right, uses new learning, they typically need some reinforcement from that. The attaboys or the attapersons, in order for them to continue to try doing that. There's also the issue of interpersonal skills. If the behavioral skills or interpersonal skills are important, and we believe they are, then there needs to be coaching, there needs to be a little bit of gentle guidance in that area. So we group both of those, the reinforcing attitudes plus the interpersonal skills, into the third rung of the ladder, the attitudes. And then, of course, we get to competence. Competence essentially comes from taking that skill, taking that reinforcement, and trying it in different situations, being able to perhaps extrapolate what worked in one situation into a situation that's more complex. And then once we move beyond competence, we get to performance. And performance really results from reflection about what you did and how that made a difference for the business. There's a pretty interesting element to these 4+1 levels. The first four are all inputs. Performance is an output. The result of turning training into learning can be a 2 times improvement in the performance of all of your learners in your organization. For some organizations, it can be even more than that. Our second topic, taking a look at stakeholder competence. It's not just the project managers who need PM competence. To a great extent, one could say that everyone who touches the project, every stakeholder, needs competence in their project actions. They don't need to be competent in the same elements, the same processes, the same areas as the project managers, but they certainly do need to demonstrate the competence that their roles require. So we evaluate each project role against the competence criteria that they need to demonstrate, because we understand that overall your PM performance is as strong as your weakest link. One way we support improved competence for all of our stakeholders, all project stakeholders, is a tool that we've developed called PM Comp Model, the Project Management Competence Model. And we offer this for free on our asapm.org website. We made an extended version available to all IPMA members at the 2006 Shanghai IPMA World Congress. And you can find the link for that particular download in our paper. We'll post the link to that paper at the end of this session. Competence development planning, once we've established the competence gaps for each of the key stakeholders for their roles, the next step is to figure out the needed type of intervention. It may be that the gap is basically a knowledge gap. They don't know what they need to know. It could be that it's a skills gap. It could be attitudes and behavioral attributes. It could be competence. It could be performance. But for each of these, there's a different intervention type. For the knowledge areas, we can either send people to class or self-study. For skill, opportunity to apply the knowledge with some coaching and some assistance is a key intervention. Attitudes and behavioral attributes is where managers can come into play, or peers can actually help here. Some people are actually more motivated by peer praise than by managers coming around and saying, hey, that's really cool. Competence is a little bit more difficult because you need to be able to apply those basic skills in new areas so that competence grows and the ability to adapt that skill to different situation increases. And then performance is a key part. Well, first of all, you have to achieve performance, but then you have to be able to reflect at the end of a project or at the end of an individual assignment in what you did and how you would do things in a more effective way, and how did you contribute to the performance of that end product. Once you've identified the interventions, you plan them, you establish the key roles that need to help you with them. You also need to establish the measures, how you'll know you're making progress in each of those areas. Implement that plan, and then follow up and evaluate. You monitor, and then make sure that you're not just looking at whether the gap has been filled, but how did it help the project overall? And then, of course, you repeat the process. We've found that going through an organization about every 1.5 to 2 years is a great way to establish improved PM competence using this approach. Once again, the big win, once we've done all of this, is stakeholder competence in a doubling or more of improvement. Topic 3. Focusing on managers in the middle. These are the managers that are everything from one level down from vice presidents to one level up from first level managers, and there can be 3 to 10 layers of managers in the middle in many larger organizations today. They include functional managers, they could be operational managers. They're all the people who have some part in the communication chain between a project team and executive management. Part of their job is to filter and condense the information that those above them don't need to hear, but to amplify the communication that those managers above them do need to hear. And of course, it's a two-way communication process. These managers in the middle typically have equal or more impact on project performance as compared to both of the other topics, the project managers and the other direct stakeholders of the project. Now, they don't need PM certification. They may need to know what they need to do to manage a project environment, to manage the project managers who are reporting to them, and how to add value on everything they touch in the project environment. Many of these managers are incredibly effective. Usually in any organization, you'll find a handful who just are not. They can be the key to massive performance improvement if you can help them to add value to project work. We have a series of initiatives in this area as well, identifying, for example, the competences that managers in the middle need to demonstrate, helping them establish new insights about the value of projects to the organization and the value they bring to projects, and helping organizations identify competence enablers who can help in coaching for success. Now, once you've dealt with the managers in the middle, of course, executives also know how to manage the successful project climate. One thing that we saw long ago is if you go to the executives first and get them all excited about how their organization should be performing without also helping the managers in the middle to improve their communication, improve their value add to project work, well, we've seen too many disasters where the executives demanded PM performance and the managers in the middle didn't know how to get them there. So that's why we follow on with executives. We're dealing with managers in the middle first. Here's a case study about that particular kind of scenario. It's called Up, Down, or Out. You can kind of take that or leave that for now. The client was Big Oil. This was about 20 years ago. The situation was this was already a very effective, very competitive Big Oil organization, but executive management knew that they could be even more effective. We worked with executives in the organization, did assessments all the way up and down the chain of command. The CEO, when we said it takes 1 year per level in your organization to make the cultural changes you're talking about, started counting on his fingers. And when he ran out of fingers and started looking at his shoes, he then said, I can see how we can cut 3 years out of this process. Among the actions that we took after our assessment of the managers in the middle was to identify a 3-day class. Its official title was Managing Project Managers. The unofficial name for that class, though, was Up, Down, or Out. And what we did in that class was to help managers see how they could and should add value to all the project work in their domain. One of the interesting things in coming out of that particular session, we did end up cutting some layers of middle managers. Some managers had the opportunity to move down 1 level or 2 levels to the point where they had been a great individual contributor and at the same rate of pay. Some managers actually were able to take the jobs of their managers because their managers were not adding value to the project and processes. And some managers actually took an early retirement buyout. We helped develop role-based PM competences in all the rest of the managers. And what do you think was the performance result for this particular organization? Well, it wasn't quite the 2 times improvement, but over a 2.5-year period after this 6 months long initiative, we saw easily a 75% improvement in their measured results. Now, of course, when we talk about improvement, you have to understand what the baseline is. One of the consistent challenges that we see in any PM performance improvement is so many organizations look at what's easy to measure and not valuable to the organization. So there are some pretty important elements of measuring the right things when you're measuring improvement. Moving on to topic 4, assessing organizational PM performance. ASAPM saw the need to move beyond the topical assessments at the project level or perhaps at a departmental level and take a look at the entire organization, looking at the whole organization, looking at the culture and where it supported most and where it supported least successful projects. We looked for the smartest improvement alternatives that an organization could establish, because we've seen far too many cases where organizations bought tools when they should have instead bought policies. We analyzed interactions of individual strengths, and we looked at the need to certify performing organizations. Our vision was to accomplish all of this with an open source, not closed source, freely available approach using either recognized assessors or do-it-yourself internal assessment. The result was ASAPM's A-Pro, as you can see in the small print down there, the ASAPM Performance Rated Organization Assessment Process. Now, the A-Pro and the acronym up there, you see the link down below, not just another maturity model. We found dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of maturity models, and the problem with maturity models is that they don't necessarily relate all the time to project management. Rather than levels of maturity, we find that often the missing link, which is not a function of maturity, is the biggest barrier to PM performance improvement. So a performance orientation moves us beyond the maturity level details of inspecting all the inputs and processes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We've made it freely available for easy self-assessment or with professional assessors. It clearly shows your greatest opportunities for PM performance improvement, and uniquely, it offers PM certification of a whole organization. Now, that could be an enterprise, it could be one site of a company or a government unit, it could very well just be one department, but that's A-Pro, the organizational assessment. Let's drill down a little bit on this difference between maturity model assessment and performance assessment. If you like omelets and one day have a bad one, then you're going to be kind of wary about omelets for a while, unless you're satisfied that that next omelet that you eat is going to be another good one. So given the omelet example, one way to determine that next omelet that you eat is going to be a good one, we'll call it option A, is to evaluate and assess all the processes involved with making the omelet, then verify that all the inputs are of the desired quality, that the eggs aren't too stale and all of that. The outcome of this assessment is the evidence that the omelet is probably okay. Now, how happy are you going to be with that? It probably depends on the quality of the assessment and how skilled the assessors are in assessing the right things. Option B, a performance approach, taste the omelet. Now, just looking at the words on the screen, we can see a significant difference between the two approaches, and it's typically 2 to 4 times the effort and cost to use an option A when you could be using an option B. So performance assessment has a huge benefit. Of course, it also is the way that ASAPM assesses project managers for very much the same reasons. Another aspect of moving beyond PM maturity is we're seeing a lot of action in organizations that have been CMM level 5 who are now saying, that's a great start, but it's still not enough. So if we look over here on the right side of this chart, we can see excellent results as a step beyond CMMI level 5. And we see fully satisfied customers. This gets a little bit more at the performance measures that we look for in an organization. So even the leaders in Software Engineering Institute Capability Maturity Model, or CMMI today, are saying, yes, maturity models are great, but there's got to be something beyond that, and it's performance. Another example of how organizational assessment works. This is another of our clients, an aerospace leader who in a given year turned down $17 billion of new work, new bidding opportunities, because they were not confident they could manage it effectively. We went in, talked with managers, talked with project and program managers, did an assessment across many of the things that the organization did, from top executive management and the way that they rewarded their people, all the way down to the details of outsourcing arrangements and whether they had conditions of performance associated with them. So given that we had gone through all of that, we made a few very specific recommendations, and it wasn't very much. The following year, they scored $24 billion more contracts, those were projects and programs, in that next year. And that's a pretty significant growth for a fairly small aerospace leader organization. The secret overall is the executives grasped the importance of taking a look at the entire organization rather than a compartmentalized look at one project or program. So our experience is that the type of performance approach to look at the organization not only works, it works well. So let's see what kind of improvement we can get there. Once again, it's 2 times or more depending on the situation. And by now you're probably doing in your head what the total may be, but we're not quite to there yet. So let's wait a little bit. What we've discussed is 4 different areas of potential PM performance. The first, not just doing training, but performing learning. That's a good first step. Then establishing stakeholder competence, not just the project managers. Next, middle manager effectiveness, and then organizational PM performance. Now, in your organization, you may already be great in many of these areas, but if performance is all about going fast, that tire's only flat on the bottom, but it's not going to go very fast because that flat spot is going to slow everything else down. So we suggest that you look at where you can apply the opportunity that's greatest for you and see what you can do to improve your PM performance. One of the things that we've seen is consistently when you finish one area and look at the next area, when you go back to that first area, you'll see still more opportunities for improvement. So for those who do the math, let's see, we've got 2 times, 2 times, that's 4 times, 2 times, that's 8 times, 2 times, that would be 16 times if you did all of these, if you applied all of these opportunities, right? Well, it's not quite that easy. Our experience is an organization can do a 6 times to 10 times measured improvement, assuming that you're measuring and have good baselines on all of the right measures. And the interesting thing is it's repeatable. So one more little story here. Working with a mid-range consultancy that was already a leader in their industry. We sat down with them, identified many of the things we've talked about in this session, and they made a list of the improvements that they intended to make over a 3.5-year period. Now, we didn't have much to do with their project during that 3.5-year period, aside from just checking in every now and then to see how they were doing. But at the end of that time, we held an audit and a manager's meeting, and we went through all of their actions, all of their measures, all of their improvements, and they measured a 10 times improvement over that 3.5 years. Some of their measures included things like the unit cost of a particular part of project work. Some of those things dealt with measures of client or customer satisfaction. So these were very real measures, not esoteric ones, and not just the easy measures that too many organizations stick with. But the amazing thing about it for this organization that was already one of the top in its business is that after they were satisfied that they had demonstrated that 10 times improvement, they identified the actions that they would take for their next 10 times. And the last I saw, they were doing it. So this is repeatable. I've not seen personally it being repeated a second time, but I believe it's possible. That's it for this presentation. In our dialogue session, we had the opportunity for questions and comments, but if you do have questions or comments, my email is here, president or pres@asapm.org. A copy of the paper that backs this up, it's about a 8-page paper, is at projectexperts.com/articles. And for the last part of this, Alex Brown at Real Life Projects Inc., that's rlprj.com, is our gold sponsor for the 2010 ASAPM Dialogue Series of webinars. We invite you to go visit him at his website. He has a whole string of really good webinars. And if you want one PDU for this session, go ahead and email your name and certification number to Alex at rlprj.com. And again, if you have any questions, forward them to me, Stacy Goff, at president@asapm.org. And thank you very much for listening.